Emma? He summoned her, arms up, angling his face for a kiss. Beverly touched her cheek to his, powder flaking from the fine creases laid down by too many decades on a dairy farm in the state's wide southern valleys, before she fled the punishing sun and scouring wind, trading the ammoniac reek of cows for the cool shelter of Duck Creek, a pine-scented mining town turned ski resort within shouting distance of the Canadian border. Julia disentangled herself from Calvin's grasp and turned back to the pressing matter of Julia's faults. "Is that what you're going to wear?" 7 in the morning, and Beverly was decked out in tweed skirt, boiled wool jacket, and for God's sake, pearls. It was Bridge Club day, competitive in ways that went beyond the game. Julia often wondered at Beverly's enthusiasm for a pastime that, despite the alacrity with which she'd adopted the mufti of a town dowager, required such an unsparing display of her hands. The nails might have been expertly manicured, but the sophistication ended there. Her fingers were knotted as old rope, betraying their competence, hands that could work their way inside a bellowing cow and hook a calving chain around tiny hooves, and then, after a rough scrubbing with grainy soap, rub lard into flour for a pie crust of surpassing flakiness. Julia suspected Beverly's resentment of her was twofold. Not only did her mother-in-law blame Julia for her son's death, if she hadn't gotten herself pregnant, as though Michael had nothing to do with it, he'd never have felt obligated to join the army, dangling the signing bonus as a someday down payment on a house of their own. But Julia also remembered the Beverly of old, who'd sold the farm the day after she buried her own husband and moved to Duck Creek, abandoning along the way her muck boots in favor of a collection of slipper-soft pumps from the Little Heel Shop. A pair, dove gray to match her jacket, waited by the front door, ready for their final few outings before winter swept in and demanded sorrels. The only holdover from that former life was Lyle, a bobtailed barn cat, grown fat in his retirement from rodent patrol. He sauntered across the kitchen and positioned himself beside Julia's chair, lifting a paw and dragging his rough tongue across it, pretending indifference, aware that if Beverly turned her back, some eggs were bound to slide his way. Julia offered what she knew would be an unacceptable explanation for her attire. "I've got jail." It was her turn in the public defender's rotation to interview the miscreants who'd been booked into the county jail overnight, or early that morning, in preparation for their court appearances the next day. She wore a formless below-the-knee dress, dark tights, and clogs, the defense against the inevitability that her clients would see her as a woman first, their lawyer later. She couldn't keep track of how many times they'd hit on her. "What have you got in mind?" she'd snapped at one early on. "Candlelight dinner in the interview room?" A mistake. He'd told her exactly what he had in mind. The radio's somnolent recitation went shrill, with a soundbite from Duck Creek's leading mayoral candidate, volume rising, the campaign at a fever pitch in these final weeks before the election. The candidate's voice was high and hoarse, with a hint of a lisp, oddly unsuited to his penchant for diatribes. He railed against immigrants, the perfect segue into a local spot about the town's refugee program. "Send them back, and this bull—" the candidate blustered, the word cut off just in time. Beverly glanced toward Calvin, killed the radio, and moved to distract. "Time, dear. You don't want to be late for your important job." A scalpel slipped deftly between Julia's ribs, twisted with a verbal flick of the wrist. Julia's clients were nobody's idea of important, nor did her job command the kind of salary that merited the word. Even living with Beverly, it would take her years to pay off her law school loans, a span Julia had calculated to the day, a weekly notation of the time remaining typed into the calendar on her phone. The minute that number hit 0, she'd kiss Duck Creek goodbye.